So this is classic conditioning in school with censors, that you are rewarded for what you really like and punished for what interests you, and that goes on in your job. And Skinner said that he himself can teach pigeons about this principle of reward, punishment, how to play table tennis, and there are really nasty spiritual teachers who claim that we in the West are just big, complex, trained rats. So I increasingly looked at what motives I had for acting, simply to get recognition or to avoid fear or punishment, and so buried impulses from life increasingly appeared. So from that point of view, I was more curious to expand the whole thing. So I wanted to first feel this liberation from thinking. Self-awareness is who I am because of this old monk exercise. And now next it was food, shoes, housing, meaning in life, relationships, nothing more. Let's start with experience. That's a good idea for every pair of shoes. I've been living barefoot for over 2 years now. I started off with Vibram 5 fingers, which are similar to Neanderthals. These are something like gloves for the foot, from subtle to totally flashy, so a successful shocker for everyone. And when I reported this on YouTube, it was initially requested, so Barefoot for Beginners, die-hard barefoot people immediately wrote, yes, that's as superfluous as a video like the one I made at the beginning about barefoot shoes. That's unnecessary, but I'm still of the opinion that someone who lives in the city and has mostly worn shoes for decades is slowing down, and I also have shoes for special things, i.e. clipless bicycle pedals are really bad. Although this has already happened to me. When I heard from a friend who said, yes, I'll drive you here and there to the rowing club. There you can go to the paddling club and back by bike. Well, I completely forgot about the shoes because the bike is there and I thought it was great. The bike was very slow, conscious bike because I didn't want to push the route either. So you get used to it without it at all. This brooding about sneakers started when I read the book Born to Run. It's about ultramarathon freaks. Many people argue about whether it's well written. I always found the passages about how Nike shoes were invented as well, exciting in their harmfulness, were completely questioned in a running freak book like this, that they don't keep their promises at all, that this time sequence between cushioning and then impact, which is passed on to the knee, that everything falls apart, that they didn't do that much, and now I was jogging and there it was. I'm exaggerating a bit. They were always the winners, and they only had minimalist sandals on their feet. They also ate very little, and I always find that exciting. I think they're not programmed that way yet, and somehow they seem to have been doing it that way for generations. So I had carefully switched to these Vibrams, but now it's mainly about reactions, and that wasn't bad yet, so you can wear them in the city like Berlin. Because there were funny occasions, I only work at seminars, so rather in churches, and so that my seminar could take place in Bielefeld. Then the priest, the colleague, asked me to help out in the service. Yes, if you're already there, you can't give the sermon. And hey presto, I thought, well, can I say something about mysticism? And hey presto, I had it. Where I said, I don't have anything with me now. No problem either. Put on my overalls. Luckily I had the black Vibrams with me. I still have a photo of them. I'll post that at some point, maybe as an occasion for this lecture. I said, which do you prefer now, these or completely barefoot? Yes. You don't have any other shoes? I don't. And the result was that no one saw it. They didn't even look closely while I was extremely busy. The actual protest actually starts like this in the environment. Right at the bottom without, and I needed my time to do that first, so this is already walking in barefoot shoes. These days there's Morel, Viva Barefoot, or from Leguano, so there's a lot more choice now. It had a lot to do with it because I haven't had a cat pad under my feet yet. It's like a blubber fabric, a sleeping mat. It develops really slowly. Before you almost get edema if you walk for too long without any cushioning under it. But if you avoid it forever, you won't get anything. And that won't help either. So I sometimes took out some old shoes at the beginning. That was more like a sink. Well, they're really nice, and yet such minimalistic barefoot shoes. The contact with the ground is different. Every little stone presses through somehow. Every little branch. I first needed time to actually perceive the environment. So, aha, there's a stone, there's a branch, and because I read 3 of them in a book, that the natural way is to appear at the front first. So on the train, I also like to watch children. They have their somewhat bulky, clunky ones, children's shoes, because they also appear at the front first. Then I think, wow, from then on, if they have a heel, they won't be able to do so well anymore. And children, they always noticed, so my Vivo Barefoot or later Barefoot, especially enthusiastically, so there's never really any criticism. So I first needed this transitional period until my foot got used to the stimulus of the floor and noticed the expansion of my foot. So really, even walking into an apartment in socks is like I might need a women's parking space to park in. So every now and then I knew my door so much that I then said I wanted to go to an X-ray, and she says yes. Only a capsule tear is likely. I don't need to do walking meditation, that's what I'm getting at. So for me, walking meditation is just something artificial again. Anyone who goes barefoot becomes more conscious and increasingly aware of the environment they are stepping on. And it's really good to start with protective shoes and switch between the old type and the current one, which is why I took my time. And then at some point the desire was there, increasingly, without shoes, and from now on I'll list it, the experience with it. So I didn't have cold feet at all. That was my own fear. I was constantly suffering from cold feet, while the Tai Chi teachers always said that the goal was to have a cool head and warm feet. Then I have to do a headstand now, or always here. So I was the typical hut shoes as possible in a heated apartment in Berlin kind of thing. But because I now stepped on the front first, the whole foot, the arch, worked. Previously splayed, arched feet, pronation supports needed, congenital pelvic tilt, insoles needed. That's supposedly why sandals didn't work. Where else would you anchor the insoles like that? A physiotherapist said, no, there's no difference in leg steering. They are the same length, just a lot of tension. I thought, that's interesting since I was a toddler. Every time I've been treated for it, she said, throw it out away. So the argument was then also dropped. Help. I have to trust insoles or my arch against my flat feet. I have a great footprint. So within a year, I noticed that there are no more splay arches and arches. And my feet grew a bit. Hatred of shoes. Now I increasingly started jogging for 10 kilometers on normal Berlin sidewalks. As someone who has a diagnosed broken intervertebral disc above the sacrum, these are Nikes. So I'm not going to jump around here. I was almost tempted to say that everything is springy. So it has to build up first. So you really have these muscles at the beginning. That's why it slowly, constantly causes severe muscle soreness, as if I had ridden a mountain bike competition. Uphill, there are other muscle groups that are put under strain, but it was worth it and I didn't want to shock the others. But for my own sake, I see my crooked toes are now straightened again. In the GDR, women's shoes always meant that they had problem feet, or that we had to look at oversizing a department and see what they looked like, the models. So in itself, that was the solution. So the main reaction when you go completely barefoot is that it's really a cultural break. One thing is status, so you're counted as one of those who are poor. One of the tricks I like to use is that I know that if I don't want to experience status, dislooks or something like that, I have to set counter accents at the top. And on the other hand, it's exciting in a Günther Wallraff-like way. Instead of being at the bottom and without sneaking through, I lose face, who am I? So if I do, maybe they'll throw me money. So you are excluded because you are considered poor or even crazy. The strangest experience was in the north. I don't know what it's like here, with taxi drivers. One, that was the case when it's getting close to freezing point, and then it's still drizzling here. The feet can take it, but not the toes. And then I said to myself, no more martyrdom, I'll call a taxi. I was in good spirits because it was about to happen. Now it drove up, but didn't stop like that. and the window went there and wanted to unlock the door like that, because he finally stopped. Now it was locked. Now he rolls down the window, starts such a harmless conversation, and I asked you, would you please open the door? Then he did it, and now we can talk about why he does it like that. Because he thought I was crazy or poor, and what are they doing in the north anyway? This is a custom, as he explained to me. If someone can't pay, they take one of their 2 shoes away, so that the next colleague knows that I had to take it with me again. So now I was approachable. So I showed him my well-designed wallet, was able to clearly exchange conversations and words with him, and found it interesting. Another one orders a taxi and doesn't want to take me. Hygiene argument. We also drive dialysis patients, and that is pathogens with their feet. Every time I say the hygiene argument, I take it up again in an extra block. I say, can you imagine that there is the same thing under the soles of other people's shoes as under the soles of my feet? Yes. But that's how regulations usually come. So that was, so to speak, if you want to balance out the status thing with outerwear, so ladies know how to set accents, in the other area they don't have that much experience yet. So that brings us to the second point, which is that as soon as you break the rules or cross boundaries, you first notice what holds this society together. And that's the exciting thing. Even a theologian like Paul Tillich said that the border is a fertile place of knowledge. You do a bit of dieting, whether it's psychoanalysis or something like that, and then it's really exciting what isn't projected because I know who I am. Luckily, I meditated beforehand, otherwise I would constantly be upset about such reactions, and so I say, it's interesting what goes on in other people's heads. So the second thing is the hygiene argument and germ phobias. Now, I knew that with my job I had also worked a lot on the history of the funeral industry. You are not allowed to transport Grandpa in the Twingo if he has died, because he falls under personal law, meaning that you are not allowed to do anything bad to him, but at the same time, he falls under epidemic law. It is considered dangerous goods, and this box began around 1870, so medicine began to increasingly discover the dangers of miasma. To this day, I cannot explain to you what miasmas are. In any case, these are some invisible precursors of what we probably think of as germs or epidemic threats. And that is why linden trees were planted in cemeteries, because linden trees again reduce the risk of miasmas. Now you know why there are so many linden trees, the miasmas, and so the dead were increasingly being taken away from their families in the name of medicine, i.e., the emerging hygiene discourse. So now I'm barefoot in such a hygienic country. Germ phobias. The funniest thing is always in the dining rooms when excited kitchen staff come to me and say, "You're not allowed in here without shoes." Now I know that. That's still a solution, so flip-flops. Something minimalistic about shoes. Because I could start a civil war now, but I don't want to. But sometimes it's fun for me to say, "Bring it, please give me my food." We're busy first, so they left me standing there for half an hour before they brought me my food. You're not allowed in. And even though I answered in that case, and the soles of my feet are the same as their, they don't wear slippers either. That's just the rule. It could be true that they have some sort of regulations, but then you could think about regulations at some point. So many legal regulations are obviously absolutely irrational, and that is also the case with the ambulance driver and taxi driver. And that brings us to point 3 of the legislation. Sometimes there is a real concern as to who will be liable if there is actually glass on the bottom. These are other reasons for canteens. Yes, things often fall down here, and then it depends on the kitchen staff, I would also say, in grocery stores or sometimes restaurants. So I take it upon myself that they have promised that I have to take care of that myself, or that I can just put on some kind of mini shoes, i.e. beachies, which are like beach socks with latex on the bottom or something like that. Simple. I do it for fun, and not to make a revolution. In fact, one experience is that when I move indoors, I'm not as mindful. So I actually got a mini glass splinter at Aldi because the big glass was swept away, and then these are mini splinters, and as soon as something looks at all homey, I let my guard down. The lighting is also not that optimal. And that brings us to the point. What are the real dangers from my point of view? I can summarize one. Being socially excluded because others don't allow a cultural alternative. Either you are like us, and beyond that there are only crazy people and you deserve punishment again. We educate the recognition, we don't play with you, and so we notice how things are easily triggered. So I say we change the lifestyle. That would be good if you first build up self-confidence through meditation. Another solution, as I did at university, could be to run your own PR agency. So before they give the others the freedom to constantly puzzle over them, and for them it's mostly fear and irritation. Something that cannot be classified triggers fear. Do we want to scare others like that? No. So, at the beginning of a semester, I used my own PA agency to introduce myself to the professors for the study, to simply say, by the way, I can get money, so you'll have guessed it. I also have money for shoes, but they deliberately left them out, and then they just give them a reason as soon as you say, because. For example, could you please let me into the copier quickly, because I urgently need to copy something. This is even social psychological, even if they are just saying thanks. So from then on, when they receive a reason, they are much more tolerant. So you can now give real or fake reasons. The main thing is that you give the others a reason, and because we don't feel like dealing with them for so long and so much. The matter is clear. So I now live in bare feet, and not just at work, because that's part of my research. The monasticism in the past, sworn, it fits, and now you have student assistants and the opportunity to have them, so someone already lives barefoot anyway. Then that's funny. My doctoral student also started wearing barefoot shoes, and sometimes completely barefoot. And then it's almost a bore for the others. Of course, there are now also work areas, again with the regulations, where you also have to wear protective shoes. Then I wouldn't make a revolution, but I would implement it again as far as I can. Then there's the other danger, in addition to this solution of being socially excluded. If you're your own PR agency, that's why you talk to people who look strange, cheerful, and self-confident. Endure projections of disgust. Such a first conclusion would be exciting, how disgusted people are with their own city. That's how disgusting it looks now, and the worst places for me are toilet facilities on trains. From the first delay announcements, the morale of the users drops a bit, and when the water level reaches a certain level, I actually put on shoes when the islands are no longer accessible. There too, so always have the second pair, the mini pair of shoes. With YouTube, I saved myself from filming it. So you can know that a giant microbe is actually considered to be a giant microbe in my circle of friends. A student counselor just shouted, "Yuck," and said, "She won't let me into the apartment anymore." So I said, "I'm completely ready to deal with one like an ancient to start washing the feet." Then, yes. But then she would first put a damp cloth and a cloth in front of the front door, and then I said, "I feel like you're treating me like a dog." Jokingly, she didn't see much of a difference. Then this projection of disgust will also be triggered by this hyperhygiene idea. If you are mean, you could also counterattack, because I used to have athlete's foot, or somehow a toe fungus was filming. These problems are not there. So feet only become disgusting when they are constantly somehow locked in damp, dark dungeons, and on top of that, I now find them to be beautiful, except for my fourth toe, which is still sacrificed to the design of women's shoes. So the others have straightened out. They really used to be like that. So you don't have to say that you often see what women's feet look like in beach resorts, but actually there's nothing disgusting about them. Now the third main danger, real injury. The answer to this is like in other areas of life. You could become a control freak now, but you could also say that a spiritual answer is awake. If you don't constantly dream, less happens to that. I even know a Baptist pastor from my youth who was probably so absorbed that he broke his nose on a lamppost. And in this respect, you can say that if you have such a need for safety, then you should not only wear shoes, but also protectors. And then there are also these terrorists. There are also cut-proof clothing now. You have to differentiate between bulletproof and cut-proof. There are completely different models. Wear both. Then you really have something against explosions, but unfortunately the head is always unprotected, and please think about the neck. I used to be a very anxious person, and when you notice that a lot of your fears in one area were imaginary, you start to ask yourself whether you had boxed yourself in too much in other areas. So whoever lives barefoot is awake. The worst thing was that I fell on the same knees 3 times in a row while jogging, and there I was awake the whole way, but that was how it had been in Berlin-Grunewald. Of course, there is a pine forest with branches growing out of it, and I was awake the whole way, but at the last end where I was almost home, and I was also happy about the good time, it was even the same branch twice. And you immediately fall there as a 4-foot runner because it's something different, i.e., if you step on the back first and then roll, it's something different, i.e., if you get caught with your toes first, so the line wouldn't be stretched across. So that was another really nice pace. But that was demonstrably just a dream. And now the danger in the cities, I don't see any greater dangers in the cities than in the countryside. There's something lurking everywhere. I'll give the examples in a moment. The danger in the cities is of course glass, but also mini-chip, which is also not good for dog paws. On YouTube, dog schools have somehow added this from when granules are spread, i.e. where the animals suffer, and heated asphalt. So some of them are asphalt deserts where there is no longer any shadow. It's blazing hot, so I wouldn't play a hero there, so I'd definitely get burn blisters. Again, one becomes more and more compassionate towards dogs in this case. I believe that what is no longer love for animals is no longer so good for people. With this glass thing, you will also notice when you are awake, glass has very different colors. You can see green and brown immediately, and the white glitters when the sun shines. You can see it from afar, and there are collection points for glass creations, mostly bus stops. Something gets smashed in dangerous times after New Year's Eve, or during some big carnival-like parades. You don't have to play the hero now. But as a cyclist, these are the similar places you avoid there or after football games when a team has lost. I first had to learn that in the gravel. Even if you don't look immediately, it can still get stuck in really nicely. The feet are increasingly getting a leather-like surface. So they don't get a calloused hoof, but it's soft, it's flexible, and you're not completely protected against cuts. The nice thing about grit is that doctors can see it better when something is x-rayed than with glass. So they said glass is stupid. And again, the advice immediately, if something pokes, take a look immediately. And I always have a mini set with me, like a big magnifying glass, because I have a small water bottle, so when I jog for a long distance, so I can rinse something off, otherwise I can't see anything. If necessary, use a ballpoint pen to mark, as with a bicycle tube. You'll have to look here later. So, and then a pair of tweezers, so do something straight away. In the countryside, in Schleswig-Holstein, I thought it was great. So I've now increasingly moved to Kiel. Great. Now you can dream again. You don't have to be so awake. Beautiful meadow. That was such an Awatch effect, die Stellen. Even if you say, I now have my beautiful leathery calluses almost everywhere here. The thorns don't go in there, like under the toes, so that's where the toe would have its joints, and they're diesel thorns in gardens. I hate Elex. Elex things, they caught fire at some point. So, I'll take a look first and see what's growing here. And in forests, the typical blackberries and raspberries also have fallen leaves. We can develop very rib-like, don-like structures, but you also wake up there. Is it safe on the coast? For example, jogging on Selt Beach. There are definitely sharp-edged shells, but you can get them out of your foot quickly. You can see them well, the nastiest thing in the Wadden Sea. I'll never walk barefoot in the Wadden Sea anymore. Oysters. and there are lots of broken glass in the mud. But the solution for me cannot be to wear permanent protectors now. There are certain danger points that you wake up to, and many who have been barefoot for a long time say that they simply tell their feet to take good care of themselves, and the unconscious, even when I was jogging, at some point I automatically stopped and knew that now I have to look there must be something here, and I saw glass. So you get a sixth sense, like drivers who somehow know that the next person is about to do something stupid or something. So the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages, and if I realistically weigh them up against the dangers, I would say that shoes are much, much more damaging to health. So, first of all, because they have a heel, they really risk the LWS, HWS with a heel. Their entire body stands like a skyscraper. They are a 175-meter skyscraper, let's say. And the foundation is now 1 meter crooked. And the body doesn't do this as a whole because it is organic and smart, but rather the LWS, HWS. So if you really have shoes without a heel drop, i.e. without a heel, even if you sometimes don't see it, it is still incorporated inside or has a soft insole. And when the foot doesn't work, it's in a cast. And if you've had a hand cast or finger cast for a while, you know that the physiotherapists have a lot of work to do to get the whole thing straightened out again. And in this respect, you have work to do, i.e. muscles that don't work atrophy. And I used to have so collapsed, not only the arch of my foot, but also the front of my ankles, that some of them were already pressing against each other and pinching nerve endings. So it really felt like having a shard in your foot. And all of that, that's organic, that's the good news, can recover again. At least train your poor foot in certain areas, so everything like rheumatoids, changes in the toes, or hallux valgus, or arched arches. When it started, it affected the knee, the hip joint, the poor intervertebral discs, and even high tension in the neck. I talked to physiotherapists. So these have to be weighed up against each other. So the exciting thing overall is to see that the culture defends the sickmongers and those who say, I just live a healthy life, and on top of that, I save at least the rainforests or 5 cows go barefoot. I saw that as pas pro thotum. Since then, I have been busy discovering other pathogens. So you can see that I don't pursue this minimalism as an end in itself, but simply to compare things culturally. What has perhaps become a bit too decadent here? Maybe it's just a compliment to barefoot monasticism. Well, maybe that's showing off poverty. But an important effect is that when you walk barefoot, there is a very deep peace. So anyone who is depressed or has anxiety, when you go barefoot, it's like permanent foot acupuncture, acupressure, you can tell. So a lot of reflections, and if you don't overdo it into painful areas, if you do it too much at once, then you notice, wow, I have totally pulsating feet until I'm in bed that evening. So if they burn, they've overdone it. But this pulsating warmth is like a foot massage. And still others say, which I can understand very well from Tai Chi Qigong, that I don't have to do any grounding exercises now, but by simply feeling the attention in my feet a little bit for protection, I am grounded. So, at least for people who work with very high energies in meditation, in our bioelectric system, you always release excess voltage to the earth. And you know that with cow fences that are under electricity. From there, if you have leather or rubber soles, that's an insulator. And that's how it is with the earth's force field. It's a completely different connection. So a feeling like I'm now petting the earth with my back paws or something. The next curiosity was food. And that's just my gesture of embarrassment here. Can I drag your plate away from you now? When I talk about it, it has the same effect as trying to steal a dog's favorite bone. So I'm going to show my guilty conscience here. And I know that about myself. So food is a sacred cow. And in our affluent society, I say that because I first observed myself from a completely humorous, But realistic self-perception, a very important substitute satisfaction is, of course. And on the other hand, as long as you are satisfied with that, you don't have peace, but instead take away what you really want. So you slow yourself down with substitute satisfactions. So food is to blame for many unlived lives. If you really allow yourself to be hungry now, you will no longer allow yourself to be fobbed off, but will actually do your thing in the areas where you would otherwise be frustrated. Say goodbye to some partner, so stop eating everything, or open your mouth somewhere and see what suits me better, or change where you live, or whatever. Food is also a mental stabilizer. I also admit in my YouTube video that I was severely depressed for a long time, which is hard to believe anymore. Food comforts, food calms, food brings relief from boredom, i.e., as someone who sits at a desk for a long time. Food makes long, boring families and work meetings delicious. So this can be sweetened a lot or a little through specialties. Protest is silenced. That makes me think of the Loriot sketch. Does anyone want a piece of cake? So, we don't eat to eat, someone once said. We don't eat to live, but live to eat. So we are moving in that area. But I woke up in that area with a shock. When I read this book by Galina Shatalova, we ate ourselves to death read. Now, I admittedly have a culturally different affinity for the evil Russians. He was our protector. And so I thought, well, subtitle, A Russian Doctor's Revolutionary Concept for a Long Life with Optimal Health. So suddenly my old belief in Russians was activated, read through, real shocker. So now she is really a doctor, and we children from Zvarniak, the cosmonauts, so heroes, yes, not the astronauts, those were the cosmonauts, Yuri Gagarin. So now she was also in the team that looked after the Russian cosmonauts. So she's not a nobody. From then on, if you have so much talent, you might become dangerous. She developed a concept of how she could cure a bit of Russian alcoholism, i.e., a completely eaten liver, where there was really nothing left to do except care for people to death, but also with, let's say, more innocent illnesses were still fatal. She reduced them to 500 calories per day, where you think, wouldn't you rather die at the same time doing yoga exercises, which also included breathing exercises, then really nasty, so you still think about it, but rather die. Endurance sports, really, even under the blazing sun, step marches in Russia, i.e. in the Soviet Union. So there is everything, yes, so mountains and steppes and stuff like that, all ice deserts. So they had sent them there for a long time. That's basically it. Anyone who is a bit perceptive knows that she actually connected it to higher energy sources. It's almost a switch to light food. She must have really been busy with a lot. And a very important life. The exciting thing is that you can no longer say goodbye. You have always said goodbye to the world a lot. The exciting thing is now you can say yes. There is only anecdotal evidence. That was clear. So she carried out a scientific comparative study, namely with her patients, who were already quite fit for jogging through hot steps, and Czech competitive athletes, i.e. long-distance runners. She let them compete against each other, and the Czechs ate a normal diet, probably didn't have any pancakes or omelets and anything like that. They collapsed quickly, and their team was like a Duracell bunny. Runs and runs and runs. Yes, that was a bit much for me. The good Russian or the bad Russian, 500 calories. It's nice to know something like that. It was on my shelf for the time being. It's exciting. You can talk about it. The kicker was when someone called me to Dr. Now Amen Ra note. Well, like English, nuns, i.e. nun, Amen Ra. College professor in the USA, doctor of nutritionist in the research area of epidemiology, i.e. the development of diseases, and who says, of course, you should do that with people for some ethical reasons. Not exactly like that, but he has now dealt with what Bircher had already done as a doctor. In which cultures and when, which civilization diseases broke out, the same result everywhere. And this Nunamen Ra is going a little better for me now. You can enter it on YouTube, but I'm here with my little Sekajak arms. So dizzy, skinny Barbie. So he once won a world record as a weightlifter. There are so many weightlifting classes when he was just eating 1,200 calories a day for a long time. And he eats them within a 2-hour mealtime window every day. He just doesn't look starving. Still better than Yasmuhin and light food. And on top of that, from my Christian tradition, I am also familiar with the things that I saw in the Catholic area. Teresa von Konnersreuth in the 20th century, who only ate one host per week. Francis of Assisi, nothing more. You can say, well, there are other topics we're talking about, so let's ignore them. Because there is Dr. Werner, I think means he's from Switzerland. He doesn't eat anything anymore, and he had himself examined by a medical commission to make sure he wasn't cheating. Because there were really big hurdles that people said, yes, we need an ethics commission first. When we do something like that, people who say they've been living like this for years and don't eat anything, but he drinks tea with his family at dinner and is not a fraud, they should investigate him. Whenever people like that do something like that, there's a total silence. So with Shatalova, how do you react when someone from such a semi-establishment steps out of line? So Shatalova says she has the Academy of Sciences. Their results were presented again and again, so the Russians were ignored. This Dr. Werner also says that the most exciting thing for him was that none of his doctor colleagues found it interesting, so that it has been confirmed that it works. And if you want to delve deeper into this, no longer eating at all, there is a DVD, i.e. a film directed by Straubinger. In the beginning was the light. That's a great summary in this extreme area. Well, I was already familiar with it, from the history of mysticism and also a religious scientific comparison. So now we had Shatalova at 500 calories. Well, Amen-Ra, now also a college professor report, 1,200. So I first looked at their Facebook group, got myself accepted into the closed group, and exchanged ideas with Germans a bit. And then it started with a 7-hour time window. There's also chocolate and sugar and everything. But again, I say this doesn't happen overnight. Such a change, and I really need security beforehand. Well, I knew the Jasmohin books about light food, but also Taz articles about giving up the spoon and things like that. And I also thought, no, I think food is good at first. So keep going in Berlin, the currywurst and chocolate and beautiful, delicious mango yogurt from Serbian with a certain amount of sugar. So now I'm heroically carrying out my diary-keeping experiment with just a little food for 7 hours. And I've already noticed the first panic attacks, yes. If I wake up at night and don't go to the fridge, maybe I'll have a circulatory collapse or hunger. And I noticed that, so an inner fearful person now definitely advises me to put a banana at my head, so that if I get dizzy spells, I don't collapse helplessly, and no one will hear my screams, or that I won't be coordinated enough in my head to start up my cell phone again, which I turn off at night. So, I've left that on all the time now too. This triggered the most insane cultural fears in me, and again, it's only when you break the rules that you realize this irrational madness that keeps you in a cage. At some point I had more confidence, and left it at 5 hours for a long time, but researched it over the internet beforehand. Stages of hunger. When will I realize I'm starving? Which in turn shows that I was obviously so far removed from hunger, real hunger from which one could die, that I initially pursued it as a scientific expedition. Then I was really reassured that the main thing I was suffering from was obviously my appetite, or cravings that are supposedly culturally determined and not yet cause for concern. Because the next phase is characterized by stomach growling, I did not have. I was still far away too, and then it became clear to me that the fear of dying wasn't that big after all, because it was actually similar to what I used to know from long-distance cycling. So just have this hunger pang that then makes you sick. And as a precursor to this, winds in the head were often mentioned, so that you have to be away for such a short time when you sit at your desk, because your brain is no longer Well, something that is now a little undersupplied. It was generally said that it would take half a year for the changeover to take place. You shouldn't put any strain on your body during this time. And so I was absolutely proud to be in the 5-hour time slot. As I said, my heroic diary about my fears. The sentences were also funny because I started to eat something first thing at 12. Or if I knew I wanted to do some more sport, to push it further back so that I could then go on a 5 or 10 kilometer jogging tour. And then I suddenly had 2 bananas with me in case I got hungry. So it was all very loving, not so forced at all, always keeping an eye on the fears. Sentences that popped up were, "Child, you can't leave the house in the morning without something to eat." That was one of the great commanders that always resonated with me. The other one, I don't know what it's called in other areas, so this Berlin background. "Child, the walls of your stomach rub when all that." So that was already medically justified. I also kept this under close observation. Further obstacles were now the reasons of the others who eat something. Well, I'll be honest, the hardest thing is when my partner sizzles something outside of my eating window that's extremely tasty. I enjoy it so much, even if I'm not hungry. It always tastes good from someone else's bowl, preferably. Just take a bite and stuff, and because it's really delicious, there's no stopping it. So with a partner, or from then on, if you have a shared fridge, just when you look in there, that feeling of missing out on something in life, the 10% yogurt, I just take a spoonful, glass half empty. We also saw me eating food for a long time at mystic seminars because it smells. I'm actually vegan, but oh, do the chicken legs look delicious. I'll take a piece, I'll get my own. It's still full on the buffet instead of another breaded vegetable patty that's somehow soggy on the inside. So, if you want to do it, always pay attention to the reasons why you eat with total love and humor, and don't turn it into a belligerent warfare. If you've done it for half a year with sometimes turning a blind eye, you will remember it's not the brain but the intestines that produces most of the serotonin. So from there, the reward begins. That's why I say, it's better to leave it at 5. Move a little in that direction. The reward is that I had fits of giggles like a teenager, for absolutely no reason. I couldn't control myself anymore. When the others looked funny, I laughed a lot because I have to put up with it first. It's like being depressed, flooded with happiness hormones or whatever it is, with this serotonin. For no reason, that's the worst thing in Germany, if it were California, but for no reason, just laughing to yourself. So that's back to social recognition. Can you still take it seriously? The title of professor makes up for it a lot, or you can do more with those feet, so maybe that's not a bad thing. You get used to that too. And then a clarity of mind. So I used to have 1 fasting day per week with Rudiger Dahlke, or sometimes 3 in a row. This change back and forth, I have to say, I'm not a fan of enemas, so this back and forth wasn't for me at all. And so this slow and constant one was great, and the effect is the same. You get a crystal clear mind, and I can't really understand what previously seemed biblicistic to me. Jesus sends the disciples out to heal, and then they say, everything is fine. It's working great. Everything is hidden from us, but we have completely failed. What's going on? He says, you can only get through these extremely difficult cases by praying and fasting. That's a translation thing. I bet it's about meditating. I am a full concentration, and now this fasting that always appears in early Christianity. It's like being dignified in the fire, so everything, all the wrong substances burn out like basic feelings of fear or depression. They're just gone. Instead, you're in a good mood. And that's how the mind is. I meditated before. That was a real breakthrough. The mind is super clear. But now in society, you often feel as if the others are drunk. And as an individual, you haven't looked into the glass. The only thing that helps is building a community and convincing others. So now I'm trying to form a network, because otherwise it wouldn't be so much fun. Things that were difficult before or that you didn't dare to do, you quickly look over your shoulder humorously and lovingly and say to yourself, I can see the reasons, but don't take them so seriously anymore and do the thing anyway. That's a different presence you have there. And at the same time, of course, there are always my occasional relapses. I now avoid sugar like the plague. So during my eating time window, which is around 2 to 3 hours, a green smoothie definitely counts. So I prefer to eat dandelion in the green smoothie. Oh, groundweed, nettle leaves, of course you can do that too. So if you know more about it, it quickly becomes fatal for a Berliner like that. Is that wild garlic or what? Something like that. I'm starting to recognize diesel leaves. You don't even have to cut off the thorns beforehand. So put everything in the high-performance blender. You can also take the leaves from this North German wild rose, including the green leaves. So even box helmet, depending on the case. But there's another one like that now. I'm playing it safe. And of course it's easier now in Kiel than with a Berlin dog park, which is difficult there to find places and in the organic store in Berlin. Not everything is really fresh anymore, so green one smoothies are definitely included. Then coconut puree, i.e. saturated, unsaturated fatty acids. Definitely something with omega-3 fatty acids. And then, of course, I look for proteins in a vegan composition if possible, sometimes in powder form. I'm more of a convinced raw foodist, but when I do a lot of exercise, that I have the essential amino acids together. Then, of course, even if I'm traveling now, you can somehow get my aphoralban pellets, because otherwise I really don't look that good either, because I've been on the road all week now. So even if I have some canteen food this week, partly took to me. So I avoid sugar like the plague, because I see how I have such a burst of activity, like I give the monkey sugar, and then it's such a nightcap, and it makes me stupid. Overall, if you read the book, The Better Brain of Brent Cortright, who is a professor of clinical psychology, is obviously at risk. He is also, like me, of course, he has also evaluated specialist journals, gerontology and things like that, and his balance sheet is, even from specialist articles, it has now been proven that even Alzheimer's is irreversible. And what does he do with depressed people? So his main thesis is that depression isn't that important because people don't have enough serotonin, but rather that the brain hardly produces any neurons, i.e. new nerve cells. So depression is absolutely slowed down neuron growth, and if you stimulate neurogenesis again, the fun comes back on its own. Now you have to make sure that people leave out what slows down their neuron growth, and unfortunately sugar. So sugar is really a drug that makes you stupid. You better start smoking weed. Or because there are somehow hand-feeling distillates that are really good. I don't know much about that yet. It has also been proven in Swedish school experiments that once children were banned from all sticky things for a while, the seemingly disruptive and villainous people and learning disorders decreased en masse. So you have well-behaved, focused children. On the other hand, what do you do as a substitute, so to speak, as methadone, if you are now away from sugar as heroin, dried fruit, for example? So even this stuff, I mean really raw sugar and industrial sugar, it's a concentrate, and ladies, it leads, above all, to accelerated cell aging. The power plants in our cells cannot tolerate this overdose. So I read in popular textbooks by experts that it was as if our cells were being destroyed by X-rays. So the body doesn't get it repaired that quickly. That was a tough message, or a tough nut to crack. So I switched to figs for the cravings, and that works. Well, you gradually get rid of it. But for me, it was 5 days of cold sugar withdrawal, because I knew that I wouldn't be able to do that bit by bit in my adjustment, to throw it out of my eating time window. But I noticed that as soon as I had something with sugar or ate too much sweet fruit, I had cravings. So my main thesis now is that monasticism tries to keep blood sugar levels consistently low for as long as possible. And because of this, we have a very clear mind. With Grant Cortright, what does it take to cure Alzheimer's people? So they just had to cut out sugar, poor people. Of course, that's difficult when they get some kind of ready-made food in the homes. White flour also becomes sugary very quickly. Instead, they had to get depressive, high doses of omega-3 fatty acids. It is known that depression is increasing rapidly in nations that rarely eat fish, and in fish-eating nations little. So a salmon like this is a lot of freshly pressed linseed oil, but it oxidizes too quickly, or some kind of krill oil capsules, which then costs money again. This is important because omega-3 fatty acids are exactly the building block as the material, so that the brain can produce neurons if it wants them. Then, of course, exercise. The Alzheimer's now also had to exercise more and more in fresh air, but it should be stress-free. And then, of course, there are many foods that stimulate neuron growth, such as wild berries, raspberries, and blueberries, because anything that has a lot of chlorophyll. And so it was clear to me why I was unintentionally becoming smarter again, even though I had actually passed 50. The reactions are of course divided. So with my eating window, I say this in advance. So even when I'm working with groups or at work meetings or something like that, yes, I never say that I'm fasting, because then you go completely crazy, but that it is part of my lifestyle that I only eat within a meal window. If you say the word eat twice, you have another explanation, because you now have to provide it that fits your personality. And then you have peace and quiet again, because I really don't say anything else. And then I say, but I really like drinking warm herbal tea with me. Because I'm traveling, it's obviously stupid to have such a high-performance mixer. And with my special food and my nuts, especially for a whole week. In any case, they calm down a lot when you drink tea with them or sit with them, but these are the difficult ones again. You're just not such an absolute. I'm not doing it because I don't like food, and if it smells good, depending on what's being served, sometimes I'm relieved. And sometimes the answer is, grab it. So this one, you don't like us because. And then of course there are things like the Christmas roast or something like that. I was weak for a while, but my body took its revenge, sometimes with cramps. That was simply no longer digestible. Then I really regretted it myself. Also far too large quantities because of the fat from the roast duck. And when I'm too tempted, I imagine how I would feel an hour later after I ate it. Maybe that much for now. The third area was that I was brave enough to tackle an area that students often just laugh about, because they have little anyway. So I noticed when I'm in monasteries that I'm totally concentrated, and that this also has a lot to do with the room furnishings. Even this lightness when I'm out and about in the sea kayak on Halligan still seems like a lot of what you can conjure up out of the boat, thanks to the packing bags, some of which are compressed. And still some cutlery and a few sweaters and stuff. On the other hand, at home, with hardly any time to do any exercise, the dust has to be vacuumed and help. Visitors come and put it away. So I now found myself in the clutches of Japanese residential minimalism. These are apartments where there is perhaps a sofa somehow, and the apartment, even though it is small, looks nice in the brochure. In the beginning, there's a way to get there, says Mark Boyle, the man without money. I didn't even start discussing it with my academic circle of friends. And he has business administration, studied business administration, and discovered how money determines the entire culture. And as an experiment, he wanted to live without money for a year. But at least he still had his notebook, agreed somewhere that if he helped with field work, he could park his caravan there, also have grain himself, and that he would throw away what organic stores would throw away, can reach into the bin, and he even threw a big party out of it, with a girlfriend as a chef and with others who helped recycle this waste. Because, he says, far too much is thrown away here. The reaction in my academic circle of friends is that they are a parasite. That's not real. Otherwise, he rode his bike and allowed himself to hitchhike so that he could visit his mother in Ireland for Christmas. And then he reported about it on the internet, and wanted to go back to the barter economy again, in the sense that I, as a specialist, do the work for you, or maybe you do it, then exchange rings on the internet with the concept just for the love of it, simply because I like doing it. He couldn't bring himself to simply throw away a table if it looked ugly, but he said that he realized how much labor goes into it from our furniture. In short, my enthusiasm after reading was so dampened, it's still a parasite, and then such an impulse fails again. With this focus in life, 2 people from Berlin to Kiel require a 135 square meter house on 600 square meters of property. Both people, so to speak, so far over, now I'm exaggerating for myself, over 50. What has accumulated there? It's still good if it's all in boxes, but if you think about it, when they're unpacked, where will it go? We have to grow. I say, I'll first pay off these loans for 10 years. Didn't even have 50% of my own share. Craft work has to be paid for here. There is no cultivation here. Yes, and where is that supposed to go? Well, you have your garage, it's already full. Marie Kondo was the saving grace for me. Magic cleaning now sounds English, but beautifully written in German. There are also tons of videos from people now. She is the savior of all messies. So if there is a goddess, it is this one. Academic circle of acquaintances in Berlin again. Yes, there is already so much about it. Yes, it's just Japan. They just have so little living space. Yes, the woman is compulsive, so that's the end of the matter. Yes, she rolls all her socks. Is that the yes? Do you find your potato-like socks aesthetically pleasing? She says that you should store the things you love in such a way that you feel happy when you open the drawer. That's when I said to myself, I'm going to use this in a cookbook style. There is no other chance. I don't have any money to grow. So it's more of a small, certain emergency situation. So first you put all your clothes in a pile. And the beautiful thing is not clean up, but the thing. The basic question is, don't let the mind decide. Was it expensive or something? Mom gave it to you once. You can't throw it away now, but spontaneously touch your favorite piece. Of all blouses, of all blazers. When you notice that I don't want to touch anything here, the problem is over. And when you spontaneously pick out your favorite blouse or t-shirt, your mind is partly horrified. And she says that you should just observe your own body feeling, or ideally have someone who sees this reaction in your body. From there you have a norm. And that's the mind again, it's so full of rules. But in this spontaneity, remnants of us are still alive. And they are now our sniffer dogs. And cleaning up is something for someone else. And she says when the visitor comes, it's always just a matter of stowing it away. Also what IKEA offers. They are just storage aids. And after a while, in her Japanese description, it oozes out of the drawers again like seaweed. When I live in the north, that was the absolute last deciding argument. And that's really bad. When you have Jill Brett blouses and Jana, the jackets, Otto Kern, that's really not my color. How could I buy something brown? They were worried. And now the tip again. If you do the promotion, it is almost impossible to list it on eBay. Giving gifts really brings more gratitude and more feelings of happiness, or flea markets. I've heard different ones too. If so, they only want the branded goods. And now what €5 do they want for it? But I'll only give you 3. You still have to pay the stand rent for that. It's not so good. And whether you now have the energy, really imaginative, to make any organizations happy, it's really like cleaning out an ice stable. We now do the work during our lifetime that we would otherwise expect our hairs to do, because we never tackled it and would rather die than tackle something like that. And that is the main motivation. So now I'll explain in detail why this makes you happy. I'll really start with you at the end. What's in it for you? So, because I had a very expensive diagnosis and long-term trauma from my parents' home, I was really severely depressed. So I did 700 hours of psychoanalysis, like Woody Allen, with breaks in between, Of course, because at some point the money wouldn't be enough and the cash register would no longer be able to finance it. And of course there are these things, something unknown in which you have already invested a lot. At some point you won't be able to let it go, and you have to defend that. Still, I say I should have bought the house sooner and started Marie Kondoing instead, because it is pure self-knowledge. So that's the absolute life balance, and she herself says completely convincingly that none of the things that are in your household are there by chance. Each one has its own story, and you haven't completed many of the stories yet. And there's rumblings going on underground, and that's what's causing us to, in my words, multitask, the monk, or for us to really live our lives, to feel like I've got it under control. It's concentration. Multitasking is also stupid. The attention jumps back and forth. And a lot. Even a book like this, hello, here's your Spanish course, or you wanted me for a Greek vacation, here on a perfect CD set, or oh, I'm a classical music collection. Bach, all CDs, Schütz, hear me. Even if you don't let me, hear me, dust me off. You can go through it very ironically, even with meditative strength. But now the thing is, you can finally move into your apartment. So instead of when mother comes, the picture has to hang there on the wall, or for guests, if you're in a hurry, white wine glasses, there have to be 6, red wine glasses, cognac snifters, liqueur glasses, whiskey or some cocktail that's heavy. You already have a cupboard full again for the others. They are all tenants who don't pay rent. So everything is thought of economically, who, when guests come, quickly stops by somewhere. It has such a touch, and even great-grandmother was happy. The highlight of this clean-up operation was that Eckibergen, who lives in the house, got his parents' wedding crockery, which they never used either. Large soup tureen. I don't want to list everything that was part of a wedding service back then, especially sugar bowl, my lector. Do you really want to poison yourself? But it belongs together. The result was, I said, okay, you have your area, you have your kitchen cabinet, that fills everything down below. There were mainly 12 plates each. Because he said, but my sister is interested in it. She has always said that something can be done. I say, wonderful. Almuth will be so happy. So the criterion again. Who do I live for? So questions from minimalists, especially when it comes to Fumio Sasaki. I just have to show off. There are so many test questions at the back. There's also a lecture where I've already talked about it, so I don't have to list everything again. The criterion now is, it makes me happy that we only touch ourselves with things in our living space that strengthen us and feel strengthening. Wow! So this luck effect, that we only surround ourselves with things like that and not things that somehow have an inviting character that we keep out of guilt or to show off. And of course, the less I was left, the more and more afraid I became. So when the classical CDs went overboard and I said to myself, I can also listen to great recordings of Valentina, Die Sitza on YouTube at any time, or even the musical Hair. Then I see the video like the one on that table dances. I got life. Then I thought, well, if the classical CD goes over the Whoopere, then we can throw the stereo speakers after it. But at least it still remained a nice brand for the computer. So a lot went away. Whatever this question, does it make me happy? And above all this question, you shouldn't just throw it away, but rather make yourself clear, what has it given me so far? You then have to say thank you for it, even gifts that are meant with love. Then the thank you that the giver has received it. Other things are just photographed and then go away, favorite pieces. But it starts with clothes, then books, throwing away books. This is the end of the world. In any case, I have gotten rid of a lot of specialist books, where I say that they are no longer current anyway. It has to be by Plato. It really has to be all works. Or I'm actually reading Sartre and Heidegger again. So in my area, I really plan on rereading the Harry Potter volumes, or even the audiobook version, it is now meant to be exemplary, and above all, it is not the head that decides, but the touch, the feeling of happiness. There are strange things left over. Beetle description book from my youth, or Rosalie and Truffles, so this domestic pig and the wild boar. Some of these cute picture books are left over. When something like that is left over, you suddenly discover who you are, what really interests you. I was really surprised. After half a year I let it pass until the second phase of minimalism. Well, there was another one, that's the magazine Geo, the acrylic cast beetle. Unfortunately, I had them once, then bought them as a used complete collection through eBay Classifieds because I would have liked to have beetle collections as a child, but my mother had forbidden them. And the great specimens that I brought back from Hungary were eventually eaten by moths, because no one has shown me how to successfully prepare such a giant beetle. That was a drama. So I had. Because when you have money, you make huge mistakes. So none of my friends wanted to look at them. That was it anyway. It's not even good for showing off. And then they really landed in the second row, wardrobes open, and Team 7 are very deep. And then I thought, what does this stand for? I actually want to be outside in nature and watch animals. And do you want to have a collection of beetles instead? So always make this clear. And the children in this Berlin apartment building are so happy now because their friend says that she knows of a school now, but she can't look at it. There's also a package around here. And then children from the house ran over it. They are becoming so popular. So if you do it like this, give gifts to people who fit, they will be remembered fondly, almost forever. They are the woman with the beetles. They are already here. Yes, do you also need bikes for your little one or something? Because at one point, I had something like 12 bikes. But it wasn't until I was doing a lot of touring that I didn't have the money to afford these good carbon things. And once I had the money, I had the time to drive them. So these are such painful discoveries. Why do I have 5 outdoor jackets? Why do I have 12 bikes? Everyone has their own areas. It's life not lived again. Why does this thing always come to life? Or was it a special offer? And so, once you get past that pain, why do I buy something? You don't collect that much anymore. So it's this awareness. What hopes do I have? What haven't I lived? And in the end, what remains is defenseless nudity. I'm a have-not now. What is life actually about now? And then these comments on YouTube helped me with the previous lack of minimalism. As students, we have nothing either. What's special about you now? Then I thought, neither can I as a student, and somehow I wanted to compensate for that now. It's ballast. And what remains then? Then I would like to bring this to the end of the lecture, which you well deserve. The desire for life remains. So in the end I thought, I think I have now understood Erich Fromm. So just reading it so far has done nothing for me. This is really knowing who you are. I now have the things that make me happy. And the apartment is not set up for guests. And on the other hand, whole rooms in the house are now empty. And these are now multitasking rooms. I can have a dance party in there any time, or when the floor is laid out, oh, you want to have a roll call day here. The room is free. I can spontaneously accommodate guests there. That is also beautiful. Of course, the partner says, wow, you could put such a big wardrobe here. And I say no. So you have to divide up the areas quite a bit if your partner is not yet a minimalist, but comes from a generation of war collectors with shining eyes. I have now brought a real wooden shelf from Spermol, and now I would also like to be praised. I say, what are shelves for? Shelves are storage spaces and cupboards, and shelves are nesting places. So ultimately the goal is for me to have possessions that I am aware of, and everything that is in the second row, yes, of course, you can throw it away in the wrong way. So I finally decided to throw away size 42 Prax Corolla pants that I hadn't worn for 10 years. I then used other models and bought them again on eBay. Because in this case, I admit to being very greedy, because I was so proud to have ended up at 42 from 46 to 48, and then realized that I prefer to wear dresses. So sides that are so unlived come up in these open spaces. Instead, I realized that relationships really are the most important thing to me. As someone with a fear of heights, I even started, it sounds strange, I'm making a complete fool of myself here in southern Germany. At the German Alpine Club section in Kiel, I have submitted a membership application. First of all, the introductory course, which I've already completed. Then I want to do the top rope course. I have to pronounce it correctly. And then the lead course. I don't know exactly what that is yet. Hope! So brave! Any knots? So I've already memorized this figure 8 thing. That's also the baby's head. Then you send the pacifier into the mouth and so on. And I have pre-booked a holiday in Garmisch-Partenkirchen for August. Well, these are the kinds of things that I would have always held back because of my mind, but now I know that there is desire. Because in Kiel you often see me like a Michelin figure, when there are no young people there in a half-pipe that is under an empty open aviation hall, practicing a waveboard in a half-pipe. These are the craziest things. It feels like good. Because all things from the past, stories that were not completed, are like breaks. Actually, you have to be the one. They are silent accusations, and now this is I am the one. I am in the moment. I am in the flow. I am changeable. And possessions are always charged with energy that somehow wraps you up. So you really get the youthful feeling of your time as a student again, and in comparison, we really have this backup. Most of them can then buy something again. Yes, thank you very much for your attention.